you for joining us on day one of the CHCI Leadership Conference. I am very excited to welcome you to our session, Mobilizing Our Communities. My name is Sofia Sanchez, and I am the CHCI Social Equity Public Policy Fellow for this year. Before we begin our discussion, I have the absolute honor of introducing our CHCI Director of Alumni Affairs, Patti Mendoza. Patti Mendoza is a first-generation Chicana, daughter of immigrant parents from Guadalajara, Mexico. Having been born and raised in Los Angeles, California, shaped her interest in intersectionality of race, social justice, and educational equality. Patti is a proud first-generation community college transfer student from Long Beach City College and holds a BA in Chicana Studies and Sociology from the University of California, Berkeley, and an MA in Chicana Studies from California State University, Northridge. Patti previously served as the director of the Henry G. Cisneros Institute for Emerging Leaders at Texas A&M University, San Antonio, where she led initiatives for a leadership institute that provided opportunities for students and community members to continue their leadership and professional growth. She previously served as the director of the nationwide alumni network for Reality Changers, California's leading college access and retention program for first-generation college students. Having previously worked at the University of California, San Diego, University of Pennsylvania, and Dartmouth College, Patti has more than a decade of DEI leadership development, program management, and academic experience. Patti is a graduate of the Alexander Cruceño Leadership Development Program offered by the San Antonio Historic Chamber of Commerce. Her past and current community leadership and service contributions include the Refugee and Immigration Center for Education and Legal Services in San Antonio, Raíces, Mana de San Diego, National Conference on Race and Ethnicity, and Anti-Defamation League. I hope you enjoy your session, and thank you for joining us in this conference.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Sophia. So I get the pleasure to introduce today's session speakers and facilitators. You are definitely in for a treat. We have a highly interactive session today. So it's my pleasure to begin with introductions. Marcus Cisneros, who serves as the Chief of Staff for Leadership for Educational Equity. Marcus Cisneros is the Chief of Staff at Lee, located and is located in New York City. He supports current and former educators to build the individual and collective skills needed so they can advocate for the students, organize their communities, have access to leaders that create education policy, and become public elected leaders themselves. Marcus has directly engaged over 700 educators in one-on-one coaching and group leadership development training over the past 3 years. He's also facilitated leaning towards increasing civic engagement across the country for hundreds of other Lee members. Marcus advised One Houston, the organizing network for educators, a regional community organizing group. The collective has addressed policy issues impacting the school-to-prison pipeline and ran successful actions to influence local school district policies affecting over $11 million of funding, terminating exclusionary discipline practices, and reallocating resources to include restorative justice practices. One Houston is deeply engaged in issues impacting DACA, undocumented students, and their families. In coalition, they supported the release of an undocumented student from ICE detention at the height of uncertain immigration policy change. Marcus began a career in education after graduating with a degree in government from the University of Texas at Austin by joining Teach for America. Marcus spent 8 years teaching primary school in Houston, Texas, New Orleans, Louisiana, Chicago, Illinois. So a round of applause for Marcus. Mildred Otero. Mildred Otero is the Senior Vice President for National Impact at Leadership for Educational Equity. In this role, she leads 4 national teams committed to developing the leadership skills of Lee members to pursue leadership opportunities in advocacy, elected organizing, and policy that empower them to end educational inequities in the United States. Prior to joining Lee, Mildred served as a chief education counsel in the U.S. Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, where she managed the Senate Majority Education Agenda and its policy development and strategies for children from cradle to career. Such efforts included legislation addressing early childhood education, elementary and secondary education, higher education, and adult education. Previously, Mildred served as a senior policy officer with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, senior advisor at the United States Department of State, United States Agency for International Development, senior policy advisor to then Senator Clinton and Senator Reid. She is currently an adjunct professor at the University of Miami. Mildred is an alum of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute, participated in 2003 in the fellowship program in the Aspen Pahara Fellowship. Round of applause for Mildred. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Tomas Robles. Tomas is currently serves as co-executive director of Living United for Change in Arizona, Lucha. Lucha is a member-driven organization that has played a key role in the recent movement in Arizona to bring attention to wage inequality and workers' rights. Tomas became involved in grassroots organizing and activism after Senate Bill 1070, an anti-immigrant bill, was signed into law. In 2010, Tomas became a community organizer, helping to promote civic engagement and comprehensive immigration reform. Since then, Tomas has been a key leader in coalition and a thought leader in changing Arizona's political landscape and moving forward issues affecting working families, including immigration, voter rights, workers' rights, veterans' issues, and housing discrimination. In 2016, Tomas led Arizona for Fair Wages and Healthy Families campaign in Arizona to raise the minimum wage. Most recently, Lucha has shown incredible growth as an anchor organization in Arizona, pushing progressive policies at the grassroots, legislative, electoral, and organizing levels in Arizona. Leading in Arizona grassroots organization and politics, Lucha has been instrumental in ensuring that Arizona turned blue federally by electing 2 Democratic senators and helping to elect a Democratic president for the first time in past few decades. Tomas is the son of Mexican immigrants born in Tucson, Arizona, and raised in Phoenix, Arizona. He is a veteran of the United States Marine Corps, an alum of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute, participant in the fellowship program in 2011, and is a graduate of Arizona State University with a Bachelor of Arts in Transporter Studies with an emphasis on immigration policy and economy. Round of applause for Tomas. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Pati, for the introductions. Mildred, Tomas, that was so much about you. And as we're getting to know amazing things, and as we're getting to know both of you better and we're building community here, I was hoping, Mildred, you could share who's your community and what's a time that you've taken action in that community. And Tomas, maybe you can share back, and we're gonna get to know Tomas and Mildred a little bit better right now.
Thank you, Marcus. Can everyone see me? That's good? Okay. So I was born in Brooklyn, New York. So whenever you say the words community, I live where I live now, but I always keep an eye to what's happening where I grew up. But I am now living and being, I think, in community in Miami, Florida. So for those of you who are familiar with Florida, it's kind of a hard place sometimes, but we are fighting a good fight. And when I think about times where I've mobilized into action, one of the things that I wanted to share, first let me say a couple of things. One is we're both CHCI alums, so how exciting to be in a room of there's other alums out there. And secondly, I get to do this work at Lee, which for those who are not familiar with Leadership for Educational Equity, we are really in the leadership development work of creating more leaders to do really good work in communities and in legislatures and in elected office and in policy and advocacy roles. So recently in Miami, it has been like the biggest honor of my life to do the work I do in the community that I care about and that I want to make change in. And we recently elected, in the middle of the pandemic, the first Lee member, but more importantly, the first Dreamer elected in Miami, Florida, to our school board. So those who are not familiar with Miami, it is the 4th largest school board in the country. It has a $3 billion budget. And there are some real culture wars that are being fought in school boards across the country, for those who may not be as tuned into that. And so to have someone like her elected against a lot of odds, it was galvanizing. It was literally like I was 24 hours thinking, organizing, calling, doing all the things. And I get to like do that as a part of my job too. It was like really, really just uplifting. And I get to see her every day fighting a really good fight. As recently as a week ago, when there was votes around trying to push out LGBTQ work in schools. So this is this is not just like this thing happened. No, it's a daily in our lives. And so that's my community, that's the community I fight for, and I'm excited to talk about how we all can work to make our community stronger.
I feel like I want to call you Profe from now on. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tomas Robles, co-executive director of Lucha, Live United for Change in Arizona. I just want to echo what Mildred said. I'm so excited to be back with CHCI and just to have the privilege of talking about the work after CHCI, because a lot of us who've done this program and the ones who are currently in now, all y'all look so young, so vibrant. It's great. You're gonna think of next steps to do, right? And what am I going to do in the next phase? And I hope this panel gives you kind of a preview into like what other opportunities are beyond the Hill and beyond working in a certain elected official's office. Not that that's bad, but everybody should know that there's other opportunities out there. For me, when I got out of the Marines and I moved back to my home state, immigration was always top of mind issue in Arizona. And Senate Bill 1070 was passed in 2010 that basically, at its most basic form of the law, said if you look like you don't belong in the state, we have the right to ask for documentation. And it doesn't matter what you look like, if you're listening to Spanish music, whatever, if somebody deems that you shouldn't be here, that was a show me your papers law. And so there was a lot of galvanization to that movement. Arizona's community organizing infrastructure was very much in its infancy stages in 2010. Lucha barely began that year. And so to see the state move along, it has so much to do with consistent leadership development and grassroots organizing and mobilization. The one thing I'll mention on the examples is when I took over Lucha, we moved to economic justice because immigration was so centered in every organization that we needed to stand out. And we first started working on wages, and we jumped on the Fight for 15 movement that was happening back in 2012, 2013. And for those who don't know, it was fast food workers standing up against fast food corporations demanding $15 an hour and a union. And so we started slow doing house meetings, building people up, meeting McDonald's workers, meeting other fast food workers, other restaurant workers. And we started organizing to have actions. And it got to the point where we had 2,000 people in the streets marching. We even got adjunct professors. So you probably notice if you don't have tenure and you're an adjunct professor, at times your salary could average out to be minimum wage because of the classes and the hours they give you. So we were able to organize adjunct professors, and it's a beautiful movement that became Proposition 206, which raises current minimum wage $13 an hour and 5 days of earned sick time, which came in so clutch during the pandemic because our workers actually had 5 days of sick time already in the contract. And so all those just go to say, like, for me, organizing will always be the marathon of this political movement. And until we understand at every level that it starts at the grassroots with folks most closely vulnerable to the issues, is how we will identify good policy solutions. And so once again, really proud to be here and happy to get into this conversation.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I was thinking, I was like, can I use a bad word in this room? But these two are badass like people. So I'm just super pumped that they got us started with these stories.
Over here
And
himself.
what we want to be able to do is have some conversations in the room. So find one person, just one person, because we want to keep it to 2 minutes each. But introduce yourself. If you don't know, if you're sitting next to someone you know, like turn the other way or walk around the room, get to know somebody new. Say hello, where you're from. What's one way that you've taken action in your community? Maybe it wasn't thousands of people marching in the street, but maybe it was. Maybe it's something small, like being able to work with a family or work with an organization or something like that. Share something that you're proud of, a way that you've taken action. And I'm going to keep a timer. I'll let know when there's 2 minutes, and then we'll switch over. So let somebody talk about 2 minutes, and then listen, and then switch over, and then we'll come back together. So find a partner. Feel free to move around. Say hello. What are you running for?
RTD director in Denver, Colorado. As a
Awesome. All right. Make sure you get Michael's name. Make sure you get everyone else's name. I'm sure there's a website. I'm sure there's an ask. Let's help Michael do this. More Latinos, Latinas in office. We love that. Love to see it. What's someone else? Something else you heard someone doing? Awesome to share in the room. Please, please.
She's a public school teacher.
Yeah. Everyday hero. Second grade teacher, California. Thank you. You also raised your hand. No? Someone here? Please.
I work at a university.
So he reallocates private money to help undocumented immigrants, whatever needs they might have to deal with the sessions that they get, the first night sessions, and any emergency that might be going on.
Amazing. Amazing. Reallocates money for undocumented students in college. Amazing. One more. I think it was here. Go ahead. Immigration law firm. That's awesome. Thank you so much. I saw another hand, but I'm gonna, if it's okay, I'm gonna move us into what we're doing. We have 3 main things that we want to do together today. We wanted to come together and build community. So be sure that you're using these QR codes. Like, get everyone's name in here, LinkedIn or whatever it is. Follow each other, get connected, have conversations. We hope to build community where you meet new people in this session and that you stay connected. The second thing that we want to talk about is that we want to build power together. I like to say every time that I introduce myself, I'm Marcus and I'm obsessed with power. We're going to talk more about that later. I'm not, it's a weird thing to say, but I'll tell you why. We're going to build power together today in this room. And the other thing that we want to do is build some skills. Some of you might be organizers, have some organizing background. Some of you might work in policy and advocacy work, know what that's about. And then some of you, this might be like the first type of conversation you're having about it, which is awesome. We're going to try to build skill across all of those levels that you're here together in the room. And so when we think about community, power, and skills, if we're going to use those things to make a difference in our communities, we have to think about systemic changes. We have to think about civic change. I was a teacher, like my friend over here, we talked a little bit about it. I taught in 3 different communities in Houston, in New Orleans, and in Chicago. And in each of those communities, even though the students and the families look different, grew up in different places, the same types of inequities that existed in low-income communities of color persisted. And so I knew that I could spend every hour that I did inside of a classroom, inside 4 walls with those 30 or so students each day, and that would be really, really important work. But I also knew that if I could change state laws, if I could change federal laws, if we could reallocate money, if we can think about how policies and laws will change, that will help more people. And so when we think about civic change, that's what we want to do. We want to affect laws and policies that are inequitable for communities like ours, whatever identities and cross-identities that we might hold. And so through that work, it's public service. At Lee, Leadership for Educational Equity, where both Mildred and I work, we think through this about public service. So in order to get here, we have to have 2 things happening at the same time. We absolutely have to have direct and community service work happening. We have to have people who are working at reproductive clinics. We have to have people who are working in classrooms. We have to have people that are doing the services each day, working with kids and families that need it the most. But we also have to have this civic and political action work happening. We do 4 buckets of that work: public policy, issue advocacy, community organizing, and elected leadership, running for office. We believe that it's important that those things go together. People who do direct service work can do civic and political action work, where it's allowed. We like to follow all the federal rules and stuff like that too. Or we could do one of each, right? We're constantly kind of weaving in between this work if we want to see things happen and be different in our communities. And so in the session today, we're going to dive deeper into what community organizing looks like. And I want to offer you this simple definition of organizing. It's building power among people and harnessing that power to affect change. Building power with people and harnessing that power to affect change. That's hopefully what we're all trying to do together. And like I said, some of you might be doing this already in many different ways. We heard some of those examples. And some of you might want to do more of this, right? And so hopefully for those of you that might apply to, we want to agitate you today. We want to spark some interest that you're leaving CHCI from this week and being like, I want to do another thing. And I might need help doing it. We have coaching, we can be supportive. Let's talk about it afterwards. If you're a CHCI alum, you can join Lee, we'll help you. If you're not, you're in our community anyways. We want to make sure that you are successful, because the more that you are individually successful, the more that we are collectively successful. This isn't like pie, right? Everyone can have some. It doesn't go away. And when we think about community organizing, we stand on the shoulders of amazing community organizers that have taken different approaches to this work and have made different types of change for the communities that they come from, whether that's a racial identity, a gender identity, different spaces and issues that are impacting us. For folks that might be able to see the screen a little bit closer, do you see some people that you know up here? Shout them out. Who do you see? Dolores Huerta. Ella Baker. Marsha P. Johnson. Each of these folks have a long history of building community, of building power, and building skill. The vice president this morning said, when you walk into a room, make sure you're not the first, you're the first one, make sure you're not the last one, right? And that's what many of these folks do. And so we take and we learn from them. So that way we can make change in the way that we need to, whether it's in a classroom or for immigration laws in a state that we care about. And so during community organizing, these are 5 key practices that some community organizers work on. Develop a consciousness of power. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Power, obsessed with it. Understanding self-interest. What do you need? What do you need to be whole? What do you need to be a person? What rights do you need as a person? And when you have those, you have privilege. So then who else needs more, right? How do we continue to build on that and ensure that equity exists within our communities where we live and where we serve? We thought a lot about engaging stakeholders. Who has the power to change these things? In some places, you have to be an elected official to make the official change. In some places, you might be a school principal. In some places, you might be in the private sector in a business. You have the opportunity to give money, to fund issues, to be supportive and share your resources, right? So we need to understand what stakeholders are involved in this work. We need to understand political levers. Tides turn all the time. So sometimes some issues might be more favorable and sometimes they're a bigger fight. Again, we heard reproductive rights being talked about earlier in the sessions, and I know we have some folks in this room that do that work. That work is hard work right now for women, but it impacts all of our communities. So we think about what time we are locally, nationally, in the political space. And then we have to make an ask. We have to know what we want. What's the thing that's going to change that we deeply believe will make it better? Sometimes that's a written policy. Sometimes that's a change in the way that something is governed. Sometimes it's electing a new person into office for that seat, right? So these kind of 5 principles we build on, and we're going to really kind of, again, dig a little bit into that first one together as a group. So when I said I was obsessed with power, I want to take a step back. Poder. What does that mean? I was translating poder into English. Well, how would I say that? Poder. It means power, but if I was kind of a direct translation for English.
It's the ability to do something.
Yes. Say it again.
The ability to do something. I'm able to grab. I have the means to stand on, to go after something, to attain something, to chase something. It's hard to put into one word because it's used so. It's just used.
Love the hands,
It's
love
a
the
great
hands.
word, and Spanish. We all know Spanish is just a passionate, really good, like really in-depth language in a way that English is not. And so I just this it can be used so differently. So yeah, I would say the ability, it's like that inside. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. Can you just come to every session with me? Like, let's facilitate together. Let's talk about it. Let's get some hand motions. Poder, to be able. So when I talk about being obsessed with power, I'm obsessed with the idea of trying to be able to do something better than I was able to do it before. I'm obsessed with the idea of being able to do something that's needed because something might be wrong. And so if we're going to be able to do something, you don't just start algebra when you're a kid. You don't just start playing soccer and be good at it. You have to practice. You have to build skill. And when we think about community organizing and what we have access to as people, they don't teach you how to organize like in elementary school, right? Like those in power structures want us not to know how to do these things. And so for us to be able to come into a room like this is powerful. This is us being able to do something more than we might have been able to do when we woke up this morning. And so I want all of you to think about how your obsession is growing with power today. It is in you, right? Like, I want you to think about this as you go back to the communities where you live, and hopefully this kind of agitates some action forward. You met Tomas earlier. He's been able to do a lot of amazing things. And so I want to bring him back up a little bit, and he's going to talk to you a little bit more about his organization, the way that he's approached organizing. Because like we said, everyone does this differently. And so he's a great example of a type of organizing that's worked. He's going to talk to you about what that looked like. You need a mic or do you have one? You got one. You got one. All right, cool.
All right. So hi again. A lot of what you saw in terms of the 5 steps are super key important. And really the only difference that we have when it comes to organizing is we follow a model that was kind of developed by Cesar Chavez and Marshall Gantz, which focuses not necessarily on a self-interest, but building deep relationships within community. So one of the first things that we train our members and volunteers when they come in is how to tell your story, how to explain a challenge you've had, a choice that you've had to make based on that challenge, and what the outcome arised once you saw that challenge and once you chose to do something about it. And then the further one is just building deep relationships. We feel like all of everything is, unless you have deep-rooted relationships with communities so that you understand the issues from the ground up, we will never be able to truly create policies that hit every note in terms of the vulnerable communities that we aim to service. And so for us at Lucha, building that leadership ladder, that leadership engagement ladder has been built upon the need to ensure that everybody that comes through our doors knows and feels that they are powerful, que tú tienes poder de ser un líder. And so right here, what I have is 3 different leadership ladders of engagement. And each one of these is based on what you're organizing for. So I know it's small to see, and I'm happy to share the PowerPoint. But the first one that we have kind of goes on if you're starting a new nonprofit. So we have the member organizer who attends events year-round. You have member lead, so volunteers that member organizer has recruited from that base of membership. You have active members, so that's when we graduate them from just showing up one time or doing one-to-one meeting to now they're showing up at events, now they're coming to political education courses that we teach and so on. Then you have, at the lower level, you have our inactive members and then our community base, folks that we still need to activate. And this membership model is also really good for a dues paying membership. I think in a lot of the nonprofit world, you're faced with the choice on how to fundraise. We've chosen to try to not use corporate dollars at all. And because of that, it means you need to build a separate revenue stream. And for us, a membership that was $10 a month from our members really catapulted us in being able to work on issues from the ground up without having to sell these issues to funders to fund in the later parts. If you look to the right, this is your typical organizer leadership battle. So at the bottom, again, it's the base, low income, people of color, undocumented community. That goes up to a volunteer who shows up, then to a fellow who begins to recruit folks into the organization, eventually a team lead that helps plan the events, and then eventually the lead who takes every single part of that and creates the events and the organizing opportunities that we have. This is what we call a distributed leadership model. And the reason why we have this distributed leadership model is that we believe that if you have one leader that is the center of everything, what happens if that leader goes away? And so we want to ensure that we prevent that so that we're always having somebody that knows they can step up, that knows they are not only empowered to do so, but are supported if they want to move on to the next level. And then here we have a leadership structure for civic engagement, getting to the ballot boxes. We know that elections are not the end all and be all of organizing, but even in marathons, right, there's markers. And elections are markers to show how we're doing, how we're resonating with community. And so you'll see here, again, at the bottom is always the least engaged folks. You know, our voting base that could be disenfranchised youth, people of color who may not believe in the system. Then we bring them into an unengaged voter. So now they're starting to come around. They haven't really decided if they're going to vote, but at least they're listening to issues. Then you have the active voter, the voting member, and the engaged member. And all those are is you go from voting and showing up at the ballot box to next understanding that you need to get your prima or your primo. Who here has parents or relatives who you found out after your first time voted that they don't vote? What's your first reaction? Like, holy crap, oh my God, why aren't you voting, right? And so those members is the ones that we push in. And that is kind of how the leadership ladder of engagement works for us. We want to make sure that me as a co-executive director, if I leave tomorrow, we have somebody to replace me because the organization and the movement is bigger than one leader. Next slide. Oh, yeah. And so just one of the examples before we go into the next exercise, again, I was talking about the Proposition 206. What happened in that whole base of organizing is the first thing we had to do is recruit McDonald's workers because we knew fast food workers were going to be at the most vulnerable level of low-income workers in the state at the time. And we knew that workers, we did a power analysis, and we knew that corporations are one of the largest perpetrators of low wages. And in fact, they even have trainings on how to access public benefits for their employees because they purposely would underpay just enough so that they could access public benefits, which would mean taxpayers pay for those employees' benefits and not the corporations how they should. And so we used that model and we started building a collective union with those workers. And each of them was tasked to go into their separate McDonald's and recruit 2 volunteers, 2 workers that come to these actions. And so at each step, each worker was giving a new assignment at the time, right? So at first it was recruit somebody to come with. Next is to lead your own house meeting, to recruit these workers and sit them down and go over each and every single power structure that was around wages at the time. From then, they began to lead their own actions. So they would recruit folks to have these major actions that would showcase the injustices that were happening. And so we started with 2 workers recruiting for an action of 30 people to at one point we had 75 workers. And that's when we started having actions in the 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people range. And then that led to the initiative. Now, the thing that really surprised us in this power mapping is that we were not prepared for the outside entities that we didn't think had anything to do with wages that would not necessarily support this. For example, we were going after McDonald's. We were going after corporations that were paying low wages. We were going after Walmart. A lot of these companies heavily supported a journalistic channel. You know, they had a united vision, if you know what I mean. And it got to the point where that channel would not broadcast a single protest, would not talk about wages, would not talk about the workers, even though a lot of them were Spanish speakers. And we had to find outlets and different outlets to tell their stories because a dependable outlet that we were used to working with no longer would work with us. So that is an example of a power analysis that we fell short on. And so that's why whenever you do any kind of major project, you need to look on this power analysis because that is the way that you'll be able to see who's likely on your side and who likely will come out against you even if you don't expect it. And so I'll pass it back to Marcus to go into that.
Yeah, thanks, Tomas. Thanks for the examples of how Lucha organizes. And then on this particular issue around wages, again, as an example of a way that organizing can build on that. So whether it is around like wage issues, whether it's around educational issues, whether it's around women's reproductive health issues, there are ways that you can organize that will bring people in and help to build that power along the way. And so Tomas mentioned a power map or a power analysis. And this is one tool that folks are able to use to really identify who are the stakeholders on the issue that matters. Who are people that can make a change that I need to engage in, that I want to know more about? And again, this could be through a formal way, like you are joining an organizing organization and you are getting into the room. You're going to do one of these in a formal way. This could be informal. This could be like, hey, I'm at work and I'm trying to get something changed. Like it could just be like, I want some other type of thing to happen. And so I need to think about like, which of the VPs can I go to that will be able to change this work, right? So you can use this in many different ways. But the idea is that we have on our access who's the most influential people on this topic. They are the voter, they are the determiner. That could be an elected, it could be a community group, it could be someone who has a particular job. And then on the bottom of that access is who's the least influential. This person's loud, but they don't necessarily have that much power as part of it. And then on the cross access here, who supports this issue the most, and who, I just lasered my own eye, and then who supports this the least. And what you do is you kind of think through people, organizations across the public, private sectors around that issue. So what we want to do is a power analysis together. When you walked in, we asked you to think about an issue that you cared a lot about. And our friends here in the back have organized about 15 issues based on themes of what people cared about. And in the next 10 to 12 minutes, you're going to pick a group. And what we want you to do is think about at least 3 points on this map. Who is a person, an organization, an entity of some kind, and where do they fall on this map on the issue? And through this process, we're all from different communities, so we might know different things. So we want to do this as general as possible, right? As general as possible around what we think the issue is. This might not be your issue. It might not be the thing that you care most deeply about, but the thing that we want to do is practice the skill. Power mapping. Who's the most supportive with the most power, or who's the most supportive with the most power? Who's the least supportive with the most power? Who's the least supportive with the least power? They're just kind of, as you're going through there. So the goal is, in about 12 minutes, to get at least 3 things mapped onto your power map. And we'll walk around to be helpful. So Christina has a mic here, and she's going to share with us where those issues are.
Okay. So over here, we have executive leadership in the private sector and Latino presence in executive leadership in the private sector. Over here, we have voting rights. This poster is community safety, food insecurity, labor, healthcare,
community and political voice for Latinos, economic prosperity, immigration, housing, then way over here, climate change, education and workforce, and higher education.
Awesome. Is there one back here? I think there's one more.
Oh, that's education part 2.
Part 2. All right. So maybe you heard it and you know exactly where you're going. Maybe you just want to walk around for a second. We're going to give us 2 minutes to get to your place, meet your new little group, exchange names and information as you're getting started, and have a conversation. What's this issue? What's the major thing? Who's for it? Who's against it? And we'll come back together in 12 minutes and see what we came up with. And Christina has markers back there, so at least 1 marker per group.
I wanted to say we are cramming in a lot into a short amount of time. But what we want is for you to get a flavor for the important work of organizing, of building power together, and how that plays out on different issues. So just want to ask you to get together with someone and just talk a little bit about a moment you might have had in this session where you connected with someone else on your issue, and how was that? What caused that feeling? So share that with one another as you all have been walking around. Maybe it wasn't the one that you worked on, but maybe it was as you went around the room reading other power maps. So just pair share next to you. Hi, everyone. Can I just have everybody raise a hand? Hi. Everybody, hands up. Everybody put one hand up. Lovely. I love when these teacher things work. If you come back to your seats, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Tomas and I want to take just a few minutes first to just say thank you for the engagement. Thank you for your time. I want to thank Cassie and Christina, who were our wonderful, and by the way, Cassie's the Vice President of Policy at Lee. Christina is the Chief of Staff at Lee. So also members, for anyone who's a CHCI alum who wants to sign up for Lee, let's make sure we talk. I think the most important thing that we wanted you all to get out of this session, I think some takeaways from me, and I'll let Tomas, if he wants to share a few things, is how powerful this room is. You are all at a conference of people who look like us, who have shared experiences with us, and who also are different and have other experiences that are important to the Latino community. And so please continue to live into your power and continue to work with each other to find the power in each other and support each other towards change. Change does not happen overnight. It's the long work. At Lee, we know that. We are not here for the shiny toy or the quick fix. We're here for the long-term work of community empowerment, which takes a very long time, and it takes commitment to that. And so please continue to, I hope you got a lot from what you saw from other people, but also the conversations in this room. I hope you met someone new, learned something new, or learned a new issue that maybe wasn't primary to you, but you know is an important issue for the Latino, Latina, Latinx community. So that is my big takeaway, my hope for you all. Tomas, I don't know if you have any.
Honestly, I'm just so very happy to be here, and Mildred is correct. Look around you. It's brown people, black people, indigenous folks that are sitting together talking about building power. It's pretty effing legit. So yeah, round of applause for that, y'all.
So again, we want to just thank you for the engagement. And Tomas, Marcus, myself are here after the session if you all have questions or want to talk about anything. But most of all, we hope you walk out of here learning and excited for what that means. It doesn't mean that everyone is going to do everything the exact same way. It just means that we are all waking up to how interconnected we are all to each other and the work that others are doing in this space. All right, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the conference.